Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can become a great sight reader at the piano. Now, there's hardly any skill that's more valuable than being able to sit down and play just about any piece that you want without having to work on it a lot or practice it very much. It's a skill that takes time to develop, but it's one that you can really work on and improve over time. And I'm going to give you today in this video 10 tips that you can use to improve your sight reading. So let's go ahead and dive in. And in order to talk about this, I'm going to bring up an example of Mozart. This is his sonata in C major K545. We're just going to use this piece as an example of what you can be thinking about when you're sight reading, how you can read a piece much more accurately on the first try. So here we go, let's dive right in. Step number one, it sounds like something that would be incredibly obvious, but you have no idea how many times I have to say this to students. Before you even begin to sight read a piece, look at the key signature. You can't play a piece unless you know what the notes are, and you can't know what the notes are unless you look at the key signature. So check to see at the beginning of the piece if there are any sharps or flats. That is absolutely crucial, and most people just dive right in, start playing, and then discover the first time something doesn't sound right, oh, maybe I should have looked and checked what the key signature was. You want to avoid falling into that trap. Tip number two, be sure that you check the time signature as well. You need to know before you begin a piece what the time signature is so that you can play the proper rhythms. If we look at this piece, we have a time signature of, it says C, which is a shorthand for common time or 4/4 time. That means we have 4 beats per measure, and we want to be thinking about that and counting to ourselves as we're playing the piece. Tip number 3. Always look at the tempo indication before you begin. You don't want to be forcing yourself to play through a piece at lightning speed when it might be an adagio tempo or an andante tempo. And you want to play right from the beginning with the proper character. So look to see if the composer has given you any indication regarding tempo or character. At the beginning of this piece, we see allegro, which means it's going to be a lively tempo. And that's very important to keep in mind. Now, before we continue on to the next tips, I want to take just a moment to say, if you are a pianist and you're saying, gosh, I really love learning piano online, but I feel like I need a little more guidance of what to learn when, in what order, and maybe get some personalized feedback as well, I'd recommend you check out my piano course, petersonpianoacademy.com, where all members have access not only to a complete step-by-step piano course, but are also able to send me videos or audio or send me a note so that you can get actual feedback on your playing, which can be really invaluable. Now, going on to the next tips. Before you begin, you also need to look at the clefs of the piece. Most piano music, probably 95%, is written in treble and bass clef, but there are plenty of pieces out there in which both hands are in treble clef or both hands are in bass clef. If we look at this piece, right away, we notice that the left hand as well is in treble clef. That's a little bit unusual, but if you don't look at that first, you're going to be playing everything wrong. And so that's absolutely necessary, absolutely crucial before even beginning a piece to take a look at the clefs and also to scan through and see if they change anywhere. If you take a look at this piece, you notice that at the end of the first line already, we have a switch back to bass clef. So before you even touch a note on the piano when you're sight reading a new piece, you want to look through and see if you can find any changes in the clef or time signature or key signature for that matter. Look for any changes. Now, moving on to the next tip, this is tip number 6. Be sure to look at the big beats in the piece. You want to scan through and try and get an idea of where the big beats are, because everything else sort of fits into that. Those are like the big columns of your house that you're building, you might imagine. So each beat is a big column, and as you're moving through the piece, you want to be thinking about those beats, thinking about 1, 2, 3, 4, and moving through those at a regular tempo. The rest can just sort of fit into that. So as I look at this piece, the first thing that I try and do is put some markers in my mind of where the big beats are. These lines show you what I would be thinking about, trying to look at where the big beats are. And as I mentioned, as you're playing through, fitting everything into those big beats. Tip number 7, you want to really prioritize the rhythm and keeping a steady tempo over the notes themselves. This might sound really counterintuitive. You might think, okay, I'm playing a new piece, so I want to be sure that every note is right. It's much more important that you keep the tempo steady, because that keeps the flow of the music going. It helps the music to make more sense as you're playing through it. And a drop note here or there is not the end of the world. Imagine that you were playing along with an orchestra, and the orchestra can't stop. It's just going to keep right on going, and you have to keep up. That's the sort of attitude that you want to have when you're sight reading a piece of music, to really be keeping a steady tempo. Tip number 8, you want to study music theory. Now, why is studying music theory so important? When I look at a piece like this, I automatically see chords. I see groups of notes. For example, at the beginning here in the left hand, I see the notes of a C major chord. In the right hand, I see the notes of a C major chord. And that helps me right away to group the notes together and to be able to read them much more quickly. I compare this often to the difference when you're reading a book between reading letter by letter and reading word by word. We don't look at individual letters so much when we read. We look at a word and then we look at the next word. Those words in music are the chords. We want to be able to scan and recognize chords. That's not something that you can develop instantaneously, but if you work on learning music theory, that will come over time, and you'll notice that it actually has a big effect on making you a better sight reader. Tip number 9, you want to try to think in a particular key. So in this case, our piece is in C major. What I want to be looking for is, do I have any deviations from that key? Is there anything that doesn't fit into the notes of C major? And as I scan through this piece, I notice that in the first 2 lines, for example, I only have one single deviation from C major. I have this C sharp in this last measure. Aside from that C sharp, everything is in the key of C major. Now, in the case of C major, it's very easy because I just have white keys, but you can do the same thing if you're thinking, say, in the key of F or A flat. Think about what notes do you have in that key signature, and think not about the individual tones so much as, do you have any deviations from it? Where are the places where you're playing something that's not in the normal collection of notes? And aside from those places, you're just thinking in the key signature that you're playing in and trying to remember which collection of notes are in that particular key signature. And tip number 10, this might be the most important one of all. You want to incorporate sight reading into your practice routine. You don't want to just occasionally dive into a piece and wonder why you're not such a great sight reader. You want to devote some time every single day to reading a piece of music or pieces of music that you've never seen before in your life. Not only will this give you lots of experience in becoming a better sight reader, but it will also help acquaint you with a lot of music. Over time, you're going to see a lot of pieces that are in different time signatures, different accidentals, different clefs, and that's going to make you a stronger and a better sight reader. Now, what you want to do, though, is to be sure that you're finding pieces that aren't too difficult. You don't want to be frustrated. You want to start with pieces that are appropriate to your level of playing, something that challenges you a little bit without being incredibly frustrating. But given a little bit of work, and if you incorporate, say, 15 minutes of sight reading practice into your piano practice routine every day, you'll notice massive improvements in your sight reading. You know, the best sight readers out there are people who work for ballet companies or opera companies that are all the time having to read new music. This makes you such a better sight reader. And you can imagine there are a lot of people out there that just work on a couple pieces for 6 months, a year. Well, if you're doing that, you're getting absolutely no practice with sight reading new pieces. And so this is something that you want to be thinking about. How can you incorporate sight reading on a regular basis into your practice routine? I hope this video has helped give you some ideas of how you can become a better sight reader at the piano. If you have any additional tips, things that you found have worked well for you, leave it in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.